All for Laurie Lee. I love the way he uses words. Well, they work as well for me. Sorry, said the words. We only do it for Laurie Lee. But words are common property. They're available and free. Said the words. We're very choosy, and we've chosen Laurie Lee. I want to write like he does, but the words did all agree. Sorry, son, we're spoken for. We belong to Laurie Lee.
I have long wanted to know how to describe this part. I've long wished to discover a way of describing this part and the sensation of living here and of associating not only the valleys with the people, with the community, and with its history, its pre-Bronze Age, pre-Roman, Stone Age history. And I suppose, in a way, it's been my life trying to filter through, in a very as simple a way as possible, a communication, a description of simple language which can convey to others what it's like to live here. Living in our valley was like broad beans in a pod. It was so snug and enclosed and protective. I tried to describe this valley through the seasons and how it changed, its personality changed, its character changed, so that spring and summer and winter, it was a different place, a different country almost. And we boys, as kids, we were all ready to change our own attitude to games, and it was either skating or it was snowballs or it was climbing trees or scragging apples, and whatever was true to that particular season was something we were ready to adapt ourselves to. I remember walking through the village one very hard winter's morning, and the dogs going by wrapped in a vapour of their breath, and the boys not quite knowing what to do. They themselves were wrapped in moist scarves, choking and pink-faced. And said, what are we going to do then, eh? And nobody knew what they were going to do. And someone was flapping their arms, and another one was saying, suddenly he took off. He began to whip himself with a stick and say, get up then. And so he'd found something to do, so we all got up and we all whipped ourselves with sticks, and we all galloped through the town like Genghis Khan, like the great hordes from Tartar. And that was our game. The game slipped into this sense of winter, and we galloped round the corner and down to the farm, and then onto the pond and swimming across the ice and looking down at the bubbles of bulrushes and lilies waiting for summer to release them. This was a central meeting place, and it's still a free gathering place, and it's inhabited by coots and moorhens and dab chicks. I'm not sure what dab chicks are, but I wrote an essay when I was at the village school. Royal Society of Birds and Trees, they used to give prizes for essays about wildlife. And I think I made up dab chick. I certainly never saw one, but I wrote an essay. I still got it. Beautiful copper plate handwriting. The dab chick is called a dab chick because he dabs and dips. There was one very, very macabre thing happened here, which I'll always associate with this pond. And the milkman came in rather late one morning, Fred Bates, young man, and my sister said, where you been, Fred Bates? What happened to you? You're late. And he looked white as a sheet. He said, I seen her, Miss Flynn. What happened to her? Well, I was coming past the pond, And I thought, that's a dead swan. And I went over and I looked at it, and it was Miss Flynn. She was looking up at me with her eyes wide open, her hair all loose, and I wanted a stitch on, and she was drowned. I dropped my bucket, and I ran up here, and and they said, well, he said, you better have a cup of tea. And he said, well, I've had about 5 already, because he was telling the story all around the village. So he became a bit of a hero, but we came down here, and there was this sheen of milk still on the lake where Fred had dropped his milk churn. And I thought, tragic young girl. I never understood what was behind it all, but I do remember thinking, I was about 8, I think, that's where Miss Flynn came down in the night and lay down in the pond and pulled the water over her head and drowned. When I came back from wandering around the world, I came back to the village just after I published Side with Rosie. It was a village school. That end of the room was the infants. It was just called the infants. And the young 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds used to come in through a little door at the end. And then he said a little trap door, but that was their entrance. And I remember the windows looking out onto the valley were our windows. We were half prisoners and also half on a special platform to be able to see the valley and everything that was happening. There were 2 rather waspish teachers who didn't think much of me, especially Miss Wardley, the headmistress. She used to say, after lunch, we would go home to dinner, because just up the road, they lived just up the road, and we'd have baked cabbage or something, you know. It's still a habit of mine, after lunch, or dinner, as we called it, I used to drop into a heavy sleep, like an animal on safari. And she'd come round and poke me with a ruler and say, wake up, you and your little red eyes. I thought, there's no way to talk to a sensitive youth, but that's how she used to. And then I also had a steady sniff. And she used to say, Laurie Lee, will you please go outside and sniff and blow your nose and don't come back in until you're clear. And I used to go outside seething with rage, thinking, I'm really a prince. She doesn't know that. And one day when I come into my throne, when I come into my kingdom, I'll see to her. I won't be too unkind, I'll just lock her up for a few decades. But eventually, having got that indignation off my chest, I'd come back here, and she'd say, with a freezing smile, she'd say, a little less beastly now, I hope. In this room, in the school, I learned early poetry. And some of the local sort of country songs, like Down in the Valley, and Early One Morning. That still means this valley to me. Early one morning, just as the sun was rising, I heard a maiden sing in the valley below. Oh, don't deceive me. Oh, never leave me. How could you use such a poor maiden soul? What a wonderful age it is to be, of the age when you are your most absorbing.
Blue bunch of daggers rattling upon the wind, sawtooth that separates the lips of grasses. Your wound in childhood was a savage shock of joy that set the bees on fire and the loud lark singing. Your head enchanted then, smouldering among the flowers, filled the whole sky with smoke and sparks of seed. Now, from your stabbing bloom's nostalgic point of pain, ghosts of those summers rise, rustling across my eyes, seeding a magic thorn to prick the memory, to start in my icy flesh fevers of long lost fields.
In the kitchen at home, there was a violin hanging on the wall. I didn't really know what it was to begin with, so I asked my mother what it was, and she said, "Oh, it belongs to your father." My dad had already left home, left us and gone, but it belonged to him. And I said, "Well, what is it?" And she said, "Well, you play it, you know, it's a musical instrument." So I got it down, and she dusted it up, and we got it into running order. And that's when this chap used to come round to school giving lessons. Instead of buying the Czechoslovakian mass-produced art, I had this one, which was a copy of a Stroud. It had a wonderful tone. And I kept that for years. I took it to Spain with me. I got it crushed by a passing bull in Malaga. It was partly that, partly the heat. Melted the gum. My first public performance, which was a raging success, was playing with Miss Eileen Brown in the parish magazine, I remember. Violin and piano duet with Miss Eileen Brown and young Laurie Lee. And we were playing, we hoped we were playing, the Poet and Peasant Overture, but it wouldn't stay on the music stand. It kept falling on the floor, so I hissed, "Give 'em Danny Boy." And so we, as a backup, we played Danny Boy. And we didn't know how it was going to go, and we weren't very sure of it. Suddenly we got together and we played. We found, as it were, a meeting place halfway through the Tudor. And it then flowed like honey. And all the audience, the old women and the men and my mother and my sisters, they all began to sing in chorus with us. And I thought, well, that's because until then they'd just been fidgeting. But up till that, but then they began to sing with us. But not only were they paying us this great compliment of accompanying us, we'd stirred this ancestral memory in them, this old folk song. But they were using their hymn-singing voices, which was a great compliment. I suppose I was in my early teens then. And I realized the one thing that was important in village life was the weekly dance. So I got a little band together called the Three Blind Mice because we couldn't read music, so we used to pick it up by ear. The chap on the drums was a local beekeeper. The chap on the piano was a cobbler, dear Harold, from Stroud, and me on the violin. We collared the market. Boys and girls used to come on their bikes from miles around because it was very important to have a free-for-all dance once a week. We were collaring, we paid 5 shillings a dance and free lemonade. We were rich. We'd made it. We had power. We're in the public bar now. This is my corner. Walkback's my local. It's a very old pub. Used to be, as its name suggests, a place where the pack horses from the hills bringing the wool down to Stroud, to the Stroud Mills. They used to stop here for refreshment. And you can see Peter Webb, the farmer. You can see his fields, which are laid out in almost an Elizabethan lozenge. I don't think the hedges have been changed since Elizabethan days. Certainly his farm is that old. He keeps our sense of the seasons alive. By watching his fields, we know what time of the year it is. And he's a very accomplished farmer, and he's been there for 50 years. And I still know his voice calling his cows and calling his sheep. And this is the voice of the valley and the voice of the landscape. But if you live in a village, there is this tight, enclosed community. We're not working out a soap opera. We're living our own particular history and sharing our particular history of failures, disasters, and happiness, and life and death and marriages. But at least it's shared. And each of us, perhaps at times, think we're isolated. We know the life, we know the secrets of everybody else, except that we ourselves are protected by isolation. We're not. We know the secrets of everyone else, thank God, at the expense of their knowing our secrets too. And this is something one must admit and acknowledge and be glad of. That to share the life of a community, you have to be part of the community. You can't watch it from a distance. You have to be involved in it as they're involved in you. Coming out of school, we'd rush off to the farm and say, can we help? Haymaking. Anything to get out into the fields after a long day of timetables. With helping the men with forking the sheaves up onto the wagons and then getting waylaid, it wasn't as deliberate as all that. We didn't go over there to be seduced. We went over there to be a man and to help the men with the haymaking. But there was always a rosy type in the grass waiting to waylay one of we sturdy lads. That was their job. Temptresses of summer. And this one stopped me. I wasn't looking for trouble, but I got it. And she said, I got something to show you then. I said, you ain't. I am. Come here. So I stuck my fork into the ringing ground and followed her like doom, and we went down onto a wagon festooned with grasses. And she beckoned me under the wagon where there lay a large stone jar, and she said, it's cider. You want to drink it though, not much of it at any rate. So we unstoppered it, and I held it to my mouth. Never to be forgotten, that first long drink of golden fire, wine of wild orchids, and of that valley, and of that time, and of Rose's burning cheeks. Never to be forgotten, or ever tasted again. This is the grave of my old chum, Frank Mansell. It's in Miserton churchyard, very near to where he lived and was brought up. And we had some grand times together. He's a remarkable fellow, very Cotswold. Cotswold is a dry stone wall. He's rugged, windswept, honest, rooted in these hills. He was also a strange mixture of, he was a workman, he worked for the post office, he was an astrologer, he was a demon bowler in local cricket. He used to come up the hill, it's a sloping field, and you'd see the top of his head as he was running up. And then you see his shoulders, furious face. And then the rest of his body was just like a galleon coming over the horizon of the sea. All guns blazing, and then he whipped the ball down. And if the ball didn't kill the batsman, his look of furious anger and frustration would kill him. That should have got thee then, he'd say, that should have got thee. And he was also a genuine poet. We used to meet in a pub and go through each other's work. And his poetry was so direct and so local and so genuine, innocent and strong, like him. And there's a recording of us both giving a double recital, and you can imagine the feeling of the daredevil feeling we had at the Cheltenham Ladies College. We marched in together, one on the left of the stage and me on the right, and we really played it off. Any questions? Yes. What makes you a true poet? Never get married, he said. Never get married. Death to poetry. Made the teachers twitch a bit. But I can hear him under this tree and among these stone walls. I can hear his voice saying, from Whittentray, from Stormthruffham, from Mizzerdon and Slad, grand would I walk through summer, and happy times I've had. Frank, you'll forgive me, not being able to remember your verse with all its natural glory. I'm making it up a bit and editing as I go along. It wasn't half as good as your original, Frank. See you later in the Butcher's Arms. Sleep well, old lad. Slow moves the acid breath of noon over the copper-coated hill. Slow from the wild crab's bearded breast the palsied apples fall. Like coloured smoke the day hangs far, taking the village without sound. The vulture-headed sun lies low, chained to the violet ground. The horse upon the rocky height takes all the valley in his eye, but dares not raise his foot, nor move his shoulder from the fly. The sheep, snail-backed against the wall, lifts her blind face, but does not know the cry her blackened tongue gives forth is the first bleat of snow. Each bird and stone, each roof and well, feels the gold foot of autumn pass. Each spider binds with glittering snare the splintered bones of grass. Slow moves the hour that sucks our life. Slow drops the late wasp from the pear. The rose tree's thread of scent draws thin and snaps upon the air. I was sitting the other night in my garden listening to the blackbirds. They all sing with a Gloucestershire accent. They go off to Africa, as I went round the world once when I was a young man. They always come back here. And they come back to the same garden, the same tree, the same wall, the same nest. And they imitate their ancestral voices. And no wonder they sing with a Gloucestershire accent, because that's how they were raised. And when I think this place, I think not only of it for its, what to me is its undying, rapturous beauty, which turns slowly to the seasons and becomes a different person, but equally beautiful, from spring to winter. But the people are the same. They are rooted. They are the valley. They are the Cotswolds, and they don't move. And to teach me their irreplaceability, I've learned that I don't move either, and I come back, and here I stay.